Hi, my name is Jennifer Ozuna. This is Lazy Keto Living. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I want to talk to y'all about how to make keto low-carb tomato sauce. One of the things that I figured out very quickly when I went keto was that tomato sauce is not something that you can easily get at the store that has a low amount of carbs in it. Most of them have added sugar, and most of them are actually pretty carb heavy for a person that's trying to be low carb. To my surprise, I did find a couple of sugar-free or low carb tomato sauces, but I was in shock. Normally I would maybe pay $2 or $3 for a jar of tomato sauce, but when I looked at these, they were $8 to $10 a jar. I was floored. Canned tomatoes cost 50 cents a can or less. How on earth am I spending, I have to buy 2 jars, people, $16 to $20 on tomato sauce? That is one expensive batch of spaghetti, let me tell you. And especially when I'm the only one in our family that's keto. The rest of us are not. So they could do the $2 or $3 jar of tomato sauce. So I set out on a mission to make my own tomato sauce. I figured it might not be too hard because I've made pizza sauce before, and I have some tools in my kitchen that make things a little easier. One of the things that I do for my tomato sauce is I store them in mason jars. I get the, pint size, maybe a little bigger, and I have a food saver in my kitchen. If you're not familiar with a food saver is a device that vacuum seals your food. Well, there's an attachment you can buy called a food saver mason jar sealer that you can put on top of your mason jar, and if you have a food saver with the capability of vacuuming out of a tube, you can attach it and it will actually vacuum seal your mason jars. It's not the same as canning. That would preserve the tomato sauce for much longer. But it does allow me to suck the air out. It makes it last a little longer, and I freeze them in my freezer. So I use the boxes from my mason jars when I buy them because they're individualized compartments. And then I stick those in the bottom of my chest freezer, and I just put the jars in there so that they don't break. It's actually very handy. I do it for my chicken broth as well, and nothing ever breaks, and everything always tastes great when I take it out of the freezer. So today I'm sharing a blog with you that goes over my low-carb keto tomato sauce, and also it will detail the information if you would like to check out that sealer, and also the mason jar sealers that you can buy to go, the attachments for the food saver. It's an incredible buy for your kitchen. I've had my sealer for several years, and it is more than paid for itself. All right, without further ado, I'm going to take my canned tomatoes, my regular tomatoes, and any other tomato I can find because, honestly, organic, not organic, it matters to some people. But when it comes to your budget, sometimes you just do what you have to do to make your recipe work. And what I love about this recipe is I can do it with just cans, but I can also do it with tomatoes out of the garden or tomatoes I've bought at the store. So y'all have a great day. Thank you for joining me. I hope you like the recipe. Please comment, like it, let me know what you think. Visit my blog, check out my favorite products page. That's where you'll find that sealer, and you have a great day. Bye. All right, let's get started with our tomato sauce. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and start my heat on my pan. I'm going to put it on probably about medium-high because the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to brown some bacon. Why do I put bacon in my tomato sauce? Well, I think the main reason is because I want some added fat in my tomato sauce for the keto lifestyle, but also, honestly, because it tastes good. Now, the important thing to know about this tomato sauce recipe is when it comes to amounts of stuff, I really don't measure. A lot of the times I use whatever I have on hand. I make it and I will season it to taste. The reason why I do that is because a lot of my recipes I just throw things together. So here, what I'm gonna do to get an idea of how much tomato there is gonna be in everything, I'm going to actually put it into a glass measuring cup so we can get an idea of how much sauce we may end up with at the end. And then I'm still going to season to taste. So once I'm done doing that, I will go ahead and figure out how much I put in and go from there, especially when I go to put in all of the amounts on your recipe. So the important thing to know is that this is all very relative, and feel free to explore a little bit. Try putting different amounts of basil and salt and pepper and garlic into it and see what you like. In fact, I really highly encourage you to try different ways of making this sauce. Add stuff like black olives to it, add sausage to it, add hamburger meat to it. When I make a spaghetti sauce with this, I absolutely add hamburger meat to this. And I will also just make this tomato sauce with no hamburger meat in it, because I'll make it into a base for tomato soup, and I won't want hamburger meat in my soup. So when I make the initial sauce, I just make the tomato sauce itself, and it serves as a base to all the other recipes that I have. I like bacon on everything, so I figure even if I make a pizza sauce, it doesn't bother me that there's bacon in my pizza sauce. So if that bothers you, then obviously tweak it, change it up a little bit. I'm gonna wash my hands. The next thing I'm going to add is Goya minced garlic. Now, I'm sure there's other brands of minced garlic that you might find at your store, and any brand works. You can even chop up your own garlic and put that in too as well. I don't tend to buy garlic separately and chop it up myself, just because I don't use it often enough and my garlic would go bad. So I am going to put about half a teaspoon. Again, I'm measuring very, very loosely here, because for me this is all, like I said, it's all very relative. And actually I'm going to add another one, because I believe a half a teaspoon in this garlic is about the same thing as 1 clove of garlic. So if I do another half a teaspoon, that's about 2 cloves of garlic. I think that's good to start. I'm going to just stir this around a little bit. We want to get this garlic and this bacon going. It is on a higher heat because I want it to brown up a little bit. To this, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil. Again, I'm estimating. So right now I'm looking at about 3 pieces of bacon is what I chopped up. You could chop up a little more, a little less. About a tablespoon of olive oil and 2 cloves of garlic. While that's cooking a little bit, I have 3 tomatoes. I also have 2 cans of diced tomatoes. I'm going to use all of these tomatoes and the diced tomatoes. Now, if you're making your own, if you have tomatoes out of the garden, please use those. That's awesome. The more ripe the tomatoes, the sweeter the sauce. Tomatoes do have sugar content, but it's natural sugar content. And as long as you are careful with the amount of tomato sauce that you actually eat, you really don't need to worry too much about the tomato sauce. Now, if you're doing loads and loads of tomato sauce, it very well could kick you out of ketosis depending on what else you're eating in the day. If you're on 1 meal a day, this is perfect. If you aren't on 1 meal a day, just be aware that tomatoes are a little bit more carby than other vegetables. It is technically a fruit, and so they do have natural sugars, like most other fruits and vegetables do, but they don't have the fiber content to get rid of all that sugar. So keep that in mind. I'm making quite a big batch. I've got 2 cans of diced tomatoes, and I've got these I'm going to cut up. I've already washed them, so I'm just going to dice them up here. Let me stir this one more time. Okay. While that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and turn this down to like a low medium So I don't want that garlic and that bacon to burn. Now, I am going to be going through and pureeing this later on with a, I guess it's called a submersion blender or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. I'll put it in my links. It's a handy little gadget I use for soups, and I use it for tomato sauce. It'll be on my favorites page, and if you're interested in something like that, usually when I do find things on Amazon that I like, they're not always the, top of the line brands. Sometimes what I do is I just look and see what the best deal I can get for the very best Amazon reviews. And things like the submersion blender, or immersion blender, that's what it's called, an immersion blender. Things like that I don't, they're not really expensive to begin with. I want to know what people think of them, and I look for reviews, and that's how I figure out what I'm buying. If it's something that's a little bit more expensive, like a food processor or something like that, then I will go with a higher quality product and also look at the reviews. You gotta save money somewhere, and that's just kind of one of the places I tend to do it. And so far it hasn't let me down. Alright, so I'm gonna have these 3 tomatoes stuck in here. Notice I did pretty big chunks, that's okay. I'm also gonna add in my diced tomatoes. That's gonna calm that down a little bit. Alright, so now I'm gonna stir this up a little bit. I wanna get all that bacon grease and olive oil, I want it to be incorporated into my tomato sauce. And I'm gonna turn the heat up a little bit more now, since it's not gonna burn my garlic. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna hit this with is salt. Salt is so important in our diet. If you're on a low carb diet, or if you're in ketosis on a keto diet, salt is one of our electrolytes that we must replenish. We do not hold water the same as we did when we were eating carbs and burning glucose. So I do tend to put quite a bit of salt in. Right now I'm probably starting with, I don't know, maybe a good teaspoon of salt. And I'm just gonna put it all over. Like I said, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna taste this when all is said and done. And I'll add more at that time. And I'll make sure whenever I put the recipe together in the blog that I've included the amounts that I used. And just to remind you, please consider that you may not want the same amounts that I use, and this recipe is very versatile in that you can put kind of whatever you want to in it. So I've got this on high. I'm gonna add some pepper. I'm estimating in my hand so I know approximately how much I used. Okay, so I'm thinking this is about a 1/4 teaspoon, and I'm thinking that I'm gonna need more than that. So let's see. That's about a 1/2 teaspoon. So right now, got about a teaspoon of salt. I suspect I'm gonna need more. And about 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. Now, basil, parsley, and oregano. Now, I have dried varieties of these things, and dry is all right. Fresh is always better, but I honestly didn't want to have to go buy them. So I'm gonna do about a handful of parsley. Before I put it into the sauce though, I'm gonna mash it up a little bit. Okay, I'm also gonna put a tablespoon of oregano in, approximately. And again, I'm gonna mash it up. If you have fresh, you'll definitely want to use that instead. And then I'm gonna do about a tablespoon of basil, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna stir it up. And now, once I've stirred this up a little bit, now all these flavors have obviously not had time to incorporate, and that's okay. What I am gonna do though, is I am gonna taste just to see how it's tasting. If I feel right now like it needs more salt, I'm gonna go ahead and put more salt into it. And the reason why is because I want that flavor to incorporate. And if there's not enough salt now, we're gonna know it later. And if I put the salt in later, then it won't get to incorporate like everything else. So let me just take a spoon, a little taste. I'm gonna need more salt. So I went with a teaspoon earlier. I think I'm gonna go with another full teaspoon. Now, if you are not on a low carb diet, you probably wouldn't put quite as much salt in this as I am. But since we are keto and we do need our electrolytes, this is a great place to put that salt. All right, so now I'm gonna let this cook down. I will come by and stir this every once in a while, just to make sure that nothing's burning, nothing's sticking, and also just to see how far the tomatoes have cooked, because we want them to cook through enough and for all the flavors to merge together. And then we're going to take the immersion blender and we're going to blend all of the tomato chunks down so that they're nice and smooth. I'm going to turn this down to medium-low. And it's starting to cook down very nicely. Those chunks are still pretty, they've got some more time to cook down, so I'm gonna let them go. Okay, it's been about 15 to 20 minutes and this is looking pretty done. As you can see, it's cooked down a little bit. Those tomatoes are looking awesome. I'm gonna turn this completely off and let this stop boiling just a little bit. And then we will do the immersion blender on it. So my immersion blender has served me very well. It is a brand name, I don't know what it is, Imusa. I got it off of Amazon. It didn't cost me a whole lot of money. It splits and stores, which is nice. I do hand wash it, but I just make sure I rinse it off really well immediately after I use it so that things don't stick to it. And it just plugs right in. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through and just work these tomatoes. Big chunks, I'm trying to get all the big chunks out primarily. You can leave this as chunky as you want it to be. If you're making a spaghetti, perhaps you do want it to be a little bit more chunky. Since I am freezing this as a base for other things, I am going to go ahead and process it a little bit. Once I get it about like this, I then take my blender and just rinse it off. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is figure out how much sauce I have. Now, if I'm doing this just for myself, obviously I don't do this, but I need to know how much sauce this made. Here's my trusty Pyrex. It holds 4 cups of liquid. I'm just gonna ladle. Since this is still pretty hot, I'm gonna ladle this into my Pyrex dish. Looks like this is probably gonna make about 4 cups almost when all is said and done. So it's about 4 cups of sauce. I use this little device to put my sauce into my jars. And since I will be freezing these big jars hold 3 cups of sauce. These small ones hold about 1.5 cups of sauce. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill up my big jar because I plan on making this for a family dinner when we have everybody here home at one night. So I'm gonna put this in here. Hope it doesn't splash around too much. Now for the vacuum sealing and for freezing, you want to leave a little head space on the jar. And there's actually a mark on the jars for freezing that it says if you're freezing, don't go over this spot. Let's see. Okay, so on some of them it does, apparently. So for freezing, this is your fill line here. This jar doesn't happen to have that, but I would imagine it would be about the same amount of headspace. So what I've done is I've filled mine up a little lower than that, and then I'm also gonna fill up this smaller one. And this one might have a little less sauce in it, but this may be like for a single serving for myself. So that's the nice thing about this stuff is that, you know, when you make it yourself, you can divide it up so that it's only what you need. Okay, so it looks like I got about 1 cup in this jar and about 3 cups in this jar. So this is what that recipe is going to make, about 4 cups of sauce. All right, I am going to go ahead and demo how my Food Saver jar sealer works. So, as I said earlier, you need a Food Saver that has one of these vacuum seal tubes like this. If you have one of these, then you can put the seal on, push down the wide mouth jar sealer, and then this top goes in here just like this. And then on your Food Saver, you press the accessory button. Here it goes. Okay, and then you undo it, pop this off, and you'll notice this is not popped up anymore. It is sealed. So then you can just put this on, and this is what I put into the freezer after I label it.